Hi, my name is Jeffrey and welcome to my channel. Both in its original pilot and beyond. Today I want to explore the frontiers of foreshadowing, to see how it's used and why, and see what new connections we can make. And yes, this is all foreshadowing things to come. What is foreshadowing? Foreshadowing can be a line of dialogue, an object, or an establishing shot. Let's take a closer look. This establishing shot of the Enterprise foreshadows where the next scene will take place. The bridge. In this opening scene from Operation Annihilate, Uhura is unable to establish contact with the planet they're approaching. This sets up two lines of foreshadowing, first from Kirk, then from Uhura.
Try GSK 783, subspace frequency 3.
But sir, that's a call sign for private transmitter.
By establishing that Kirk wants to contact a private transmitter, Uhura foreshadows that Kirk knows someone on the planet. This is foreshadowing that a perceptive first-time viewer could very well pick up on. Kirk has foreshadowed this as well, only his foreshadowing is much more obtuse, and much less likely to be noticed during a first-time viewing. Let's go back and listen to it again.
Try GSK 783.
The call sign is the foreshadowing. It even foreshadows who Kirk is attempting to reach, his brother Sam. The call letters GSK are the initials of Kirk's brother, George Samuel Kirk. Interestingly, Sam's full name is never given in this episode. In fact, it's only mentioned once, 19 episodes earlier in What Are Little Girls Made Of?
George Samuel Kirk, your brother. Only you call him Sam.
Since we already know that Sam is on the planet thanks to Kirk's foreshadowing, it makes McCoy's following question seem almost unnecessary.
Jim, your brother Sam, his family, aren't they stationed on this planet?
Through foreshadowing, Kirk's already told us that his brother lives on this planet.
Yes.
He's even tried to contact him.
You were right a while back. My brother Sam lives on Denver.
There, that's more like it. Now let's see how an object can be used as foreshadowing. When Kirk's nemesis Cron first awakens on the Enterprise in Space Seed, he sees a display of antique medical devices. By taking the antique knife, Cron foreshadows a future action and his drive for usurpation. We've seen Cron take the knife, and so it follows that he will use it. And within 20 seconds of airtime, 18 to be exact, Cron is holding the knife to Dr. McCoy's throat. Here the foreshadowing paid off immediately. In the following clip, Hitchcock discusses the effect immediate foreshadowing has on an audience.
4 people are sitting around the table, talking about baseball, whatever you like. 5 minutes of it, very dull. Suddenly, a bomb goes off, blows the people to sleep. What do the audience have? 10 seconds of shock. Now take the same scene. Tell the audience there is a bomb under that table, and will go off in 5 minutes. But the whole emotion of the audience is totally different, because you've given them that information. That in 5 minutes' time, that bomb will go off. Now the conversation about baseball becomes very vital, because they're saying to you, don't be ridiculous, stop talking about baseball, there's a bomb under there. You've got the audience working.
And it's all about the payoff. Why use foreshadowing? Foreshadowing maintains our interest in a story. It builds anticipation. It also builds suspense, as with Hitchcock's bomb example. Done right, it invests us emotionally in the story. Star Trek achieves all of this through foreshadowing in The City on the Edge of Forever. Kirk and Spock have traveled back in time to prevent Dr. McCoy from changing the past. At the 30-minute and 30-second mark, Spock discovers that Kirk's love interest, a saintly woman named Edith Keeler, was supposed to die in a car accident. Her survival is the change they've come to prevent. Kirk now knows that his entire mission is to ensure Edith Keeler's timely death. We feel Kirk's horror and dismay at learning this news. We're invested because he's invested. For 17 minutes and 6 seconds, that's nearly 1/3 of the episode, we anticipate her demise with dread. Her death is not only foreshadowed once, but twice. When Edith's tragic death finally occurs, it doesn't seem arbitrary or random because it was thoroughly foreshadowed.
Oh, if we hurry, maybe we can catch the Clark Gable movie at the Orpheum. I'd
What?
love to see it. You know, Dr. McCoy said the same
McCoy!
thing. Yes.
Spock!
Imagine if Edith had been struck by a truck out of nowhere. It wouldn't have had the same impact, and this memorable episode might have been something we would rather have forgotten. Did you catch the immediate foreshadowing at the beginning of the scene? Let's go back and see it again. A car nearly hits Kirk and Edith in the very spot where she is struck and killed moments later. This is often considered to be the best episode of Star Trek, one of the finest hours of dramatic television ever produced, which is in part due to its brilliant use of foreshadowing.
He knows, Doctor. He knows.
We will be returning to this episode several times in the future as we examine other relevant topics. How to recognize foreshadowing. Foreshadowing is, by nature, difficult to recognize, especially during a first-time viewing.
The tape is ready, sir.
Play it.
Any action, behavior, or line of dialogue that seems odd or extraneous or otherwise doesn't quite make sense at the time could indicate foreshadowing.
Can that be true? An assumption, Doctor.
It may well be possible, Doctor.
Still, Chekhov's gun is a helpful rule of thumb to remember, and that's Anton Chekhov, not Pavel Chekhov. Had it been Pavel, we'd have to call this concept Chekhov's phaser instead. Either way, the concept is simple. Showing a gun, or any object for that matter, is likely foreshadowing its eventual use. Chekhov contended that if it's not going to be used, then it shouldn't be shown. Over time, you'll develop a sense of what behavior or dialogue is foreshadowing and what is just awkward writing, acting, or directing. So then what's the point of foreshadowing? Good foreshadowing is a key ingredient for a tight narrative.
Good.
It never ruins the surprise, yet seems obvious in retrospect.
Good.
Bad foreshadowing reveals too much, destroying the suspense it was meant to build, or it can be annoyingly obtuse. It helps to make a second viewing more enjoyable, interesting, or to see how things that happen later in the film are set up in the beginning.
Lieutenant, will you replay the Spalosian distress call on my viewer?
There will always be things that will be more obvious on a second viewing. I've always felt that watching a movie a second time is as unique of an experience as watching it for the first time, because of the different perspective you have. I've enjoyed rewatching classic Star Trek throughout my life. I've maintained my interest by watching for different things as I revisit each episode, and foreshadowing has been a favorite of mine. Learning to recognize it has taught me a lot about how complex narratives are constructed, how they grab our attention, and how they hold it.
He told you not to touch it. Look at your hands, they're almost frozen, aren't they?
And finally, we'll take a special look at the foreshadowing used in Star Trek's first pilot, The Cage, which features Captain Kirk's predecessor, Captain Pike. Its tailored use of foreshadowing perfectly highlights my final point, which is the ultimate goal of foreshadowing, to draw attention to what the storyteller feels is important. This is usually a significant character or pivotal event, but as we'll see, most of the foreshadowing in The Cage focuses on neither. So let's explore what the creators of The Cage felt was important enough to foreshadow and why. Let's get into the specifics. The beginning of The Cage foreshadows the places Pike will visit later in the episode. This foreshadowing is divided between the bridge and Pike's quarters, depending upon whether the place being foreshadowed is presented as real or as an illusion. The only real place Pike travels to is the planet Talos 4. As we'll see next, this is foreshadowed on the bridge through a distress signal. The foreshadowing is shown here on the left, followed by what is being foreshadowed on the right.
Definitely something out there, Captain. Headed this way.
We're passing through an old-style distress signal.
It comes from the Talos Star Group.
11 survivors from crash. Gravity and oxygen within limits. Food and water obtainable. But unless. The message faded at that point, sir.
This is the captain. Our destination is the Talos Star Group. Our time warp, factor 7.
So this foreshadows the trip to Talos 4, along with what Pike expects to find once he arrives.
They're humans.
Captain Christopher Pike, United Spaceship Enterprise.
Once they arrive on Talos 4, Pike is captured and imprisoned in a cage. The Talosians subject Pike to illusions. Through these illusions, Pike travels to 3 different worlds, all of which are foreshadowed in his quarters on the Enterprise. His quarters are a reflection of the Talosian cage. Both are places of solitude and isolation, which makes his quarters an appropriate place to foreshadow the illusions he is subjected to in that cage. Notice how precisely the conversation in his quarters foreshadows all of the illusions he later experiences. Again, the foreshadowing is shown on the left, followed by what is being foreshadowed on the right.
What's been on your mind, Chris? The fight on Rigel 7?
Shouldn't it be? My own yeoman and 2 others dead, 7 injured. I should have smelled trouble when I saw the swords in the armor. Instead of that, I let myself get trapped in that deserted fortress and attacked by one of their warriors.
That foreshadows this.
And do what?
Well, for one thing, go home. Nice little town with 50 miles of parkland around it. Remember I told you I had 2 horses? And we used to take some food and ride out all day.
That foreshadows this.
Well, they think of everything, don't they? They read our minds very well. Just about 24 hours ago, I was telling the ship's doctor how much I wanted something that was not very different from what we have here. That's Mojave. That's where I was born.
You're home. You can even stay if you want.
I'd go into business on Regulus or on the Orion colony.
You, an Orion trader, dealing in green animal women slaves?
The point is that this isn't the only life available. There's a whole galaxy of things to choose from.
And that foreshadows this.
Nice place you have here, Mr. Pike.
Almost like secret dreams a board ship captain might have.
Over 12 minutes are dedicated to these illusions, plus an entire opening scene that foreshadows them.